We all know what it's like to perform at our best, to be our best self. And whatever that looks like for you, what is your best self? We all know what it's like to feel completely productive all the time. Get done what you need to get done, go to the gym, meditate, eat really healthy, cold plunge if it's something that you do. We all know what it's like to perform at our best. But the thing about that is it's easy to become identified with that performance. Speaking for myself, I'll have weeks where I do everything perfect, everything to plan. I'm being productive as can be consistently. And then 2 weeks into it, something happens outside of my control, stumble and fall, and then I feel for the next week that I'm performing at my worst. And it becomes really debilitating because I'm not performing at my best. And in my brain, I think, this is me. My best is me. This is who I should be. This is what I should be doing. And I start to identify with myself when I'm at my absolute ceiling. And that is an unrealistic expectation to have for yourself. If you expect yourself to be at your best 100% of the time, you're missing a major part of what life really is, because it's impossible to be perfect. It's impossible. If you only do the things that you need to do every day when the situation provides, a perfect scenario, when stuff that happens outside of your control, it's going to be a lot easier to fumble and fall and then end up performing at your floor rather than your ceiling. And it sounds kind of debilitating to say you're never going to be your best, but it's true. You're never going to be your best self, ever. Rather than trying to be perfect and always performing at your best and never falling off track, the goal needs to shift to when inevitably I do fall off track and stuff happens outside of my control and I stumble and I fall and I mess up, I need to be focused on how quickly can I get back on track. But on the flip side of, you'll never be your best, the flip side is you can't ever identify with your worst either. You can't identify with either or because those are extremes. And being stuck in either extreme is just as dangerous as the other. You need to be okay with where you're at. You need to be okay with understanding that your best is a ceiling. And you got to understand that your best and your worst are constantly changing. If I think to 5 years ago, if I think to a year ago, the non-negotiables that I have for every day now are different than the non-negotiables, let's say 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I would get to the gym and I would work and I'd maybe study. Those were non-negotiables for me every day. Nowadays, I've incorporated the cold plunge every day. No matter what the weather is, no matter how I feel, it's just the cold plunge is just a part of it. Working out is still a part of it. And getting outside is now a part of it. Meditating is now a part of it. And so the non-negotiables change, and you'll notice over time that if you're ambitious and you want to get your goals, that the ceiling and the floor are going to raise. Your worst today might be your best a few years ago, The reason that I'll never be able to perform consistently at my best is because once I get there, once I am consistently doing what I feel like my best is, that's going to open up a new best. That's going to open up a new ceiling to hit. And so you'll never truly consistently be at your best because the illusion of perfection will consistently grow. And that's kind of like a double-edged sword. I don't mean to say that, it's a constant race and you'll never get to the finish line, but that's the beauty of it, is you'll always have something to strive for. But the flip side of that is you have to be appreciative of how far you've come. Because if you're like me, I can be so debilitated that I'm not performing at my absolute best and I've fallen back into old habits and, I'm still trying to fight and to not perform at my worst and to perform at my best, but then I have to stop and think and realize that I'm way better off at my worst today. If I perform my worst today, that is still better than what my best was 3 years ago. You have to be able to give yourself props and to realize the progress that you've made and then reevaluate and continue working for your best. But if you never notice the progress, then what's the point? You're only focusing on a finish line that doesn't exist. That is why you will never be your best. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And once again, just before we wrap this up, I'm guilty of thinking that everything has to be perfect. I have to have everything planned out to perform at my best. But when worst comes to worst, when shit hits the fan, that's going to be damaging to me because I don't know how to work in chaos, right? You have to become used to striving for your best when things are chaotic and outside of your control. Or else, when you're in a real situation where, whatever you're training for, whatever you do, all the things that you do every day, whatever the reason is, when it's time to actually apply them, you're not going to be able to because you've been training for perfection in perfect environments. It's important to consistently train to be your best, even in chaotic and unideal environments. Training to be perfect in perfect environments, it's a waste of time. So remember that. All right, you're never your best because once you reach that best, you're going to have to establish a new one if you want to keep growing. You can't become complacent. And you'll never be your worst because your worst today is better than what your worst was a few years ago, as long as you're consistently improving. That's the point. You'll never be your best because you're consistently improving. And, you need to be able to train under pressure. You need to be able to train in chaotic environments. You need to be able to do your best, to be your best, even when things aren't going ideal for you. Right? That's when the real progress happens. And I'm just saying that I'm guilty of trying to make everything perfect and, expect things to be perfect so that I can perform at my best, but that's not realistic. Anyways, those are my thoughts this morning. It's a constant 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Constant push and pull. You have to have that. You have to, or else there's no reason to progress. So remember that. It's a beautiful morning. Beautiful mountains. Let's have a beautiful day and a beautiful week. Peace.